Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a few themes that I pull on for my presentation, but it's sort of more broader, some of the actions that we've been working on as a team and as a business to try and address engagement and how do we make sure that we take sort of scale into a richer play with our audience. So let me just check I'm going to do this right. There we go. So Vice Media Group, the business that I work for, we have 4 lines of business. I sit in this first part, the publishing brand section. I work across Refinery 29 and ID, so our lifestyle publishing brands. We also have TV, we have Pulse Films by Studios as part of our premium content studios, and we have a creative agency, Virtue. We work really closely together to make sure that we share insights across our entire business. The fact that we have such a rich ecosystem of different types of media business allows us to take client insights, to take audience insights, and share them across all the different facets of media that our audience are consuming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to choose Refinery today as that's the brand that I've worked for the longest. I've been there 7 years, so a nice case study. But just first of all, talking about how these businesses are connected a bit more, we very much see ourselves as a predictive engine of culture, and that's the connecting thread between these different areas of our business. When we say the predictive engine of culture, it took us a while to get to this, right? Every business is like, how do we all work together? And what we found we had in common is that we really sort of are on the front of the curve. We're, looking always ahead at what's next, and that is across every single part of our business, and that is in the team that we hire globally. So whether there's a Korean skincare trend that we've got a team out telling us on the ground about, or whether that's something that's breaking in Australia that we can then report on in the US overnight, we really are connected to news as it happens, but also lifestyle trends and cultural trends to try and make sure that we're not creating the culture. What we're doing is we're really telling those stories in really different, multifaceted ways. And in doing that, we very much create community. And what I want to talk about today is how we're shifting to more of a community and engagement approach. And taking our mass scale, we reach 400 million people a month, which blows my mind. I can't picture that amount of people. That's the number the team have given me. That sits across all of our different areas of the business. And so looking at, how do we make sure that, publishers have chased scale for a long time. Scale is not going anywhere. Our advertisers still really care about scale. We care about scale. But how do we make sure that that is, really engaged and locked in and feels passionate about our brands and the way that we do, and make sure that they align our storytelling and brand values with a sense of community, and of course underpinned by our content and the data that we pull from that. So we are always looking on the ground from our journalist point of view and from our creative point of view, what's happening around the world. We listen to our community and their audience feedback, and then we also take the quantitative data from actually understanding, what does engagement look like. And I think it's really interesting, everyone mentioning the metrics for success. How do we measure success now? It isn't just on unique users, it's not just through click-through rates, it's actually about looking deeper at what does success look like for us. And importantly for our advertisers, what actually creates action. We might be able to show, to 400 million people the same advert, but if no one's taking any action from it, what's the point? And so really sort of questioning ourselves has been a really great activity in the last couple of years. So Refinery 29, if you haven't heard of us, that's the business I've worked for the last 7 years. We were bought by the Vice Media Group in November 2019, when everything seemed quite normal at the time. And it's been a whirlwind since. And it's been a fantastic journey of working with the Vice Media Group and being part of that family and sharing those insights and being able to connect better with like-minded people on the forefront of what's happening culturally. So I'll talk about these 4 key shifts that we've taken as a business to do that conversion from sort of just looking at scale to how do we make sure that we maximise engagement and create super fans. So keeping it really simple is our operational shifts. It's our team structures. It's the way that we've organised our business. Refinery 29 is in multiple markets and is operated quite regionally, as a lot of media businesses do. In the last year, we've globalized our audience operations, so that means, and our publishing operations. So that means us looking at where we've got our editorial team working closer together to make sure that we're sharing insights, our social team working closer together, and our audience development team, all as completely connected. The way that our audience view themselves, 76% of our audience view themselves as a global citizen. We need to reflect that in the way that we tell our stories. They don't see behind the name of where this person is based. And what we want to do is make sure that we're like really reflecting it with the way that we tell our stories. This also means that we've previously had departments where social was separate to editorial, which blows my mind. We're telling the same stories. What we're doing now is we're making sure that that kernel of an idea, that creative idea for, I'm trying to think of a nice example, but I probably can't off the top of my head because I'm not editorial, but maybe there's a fantastic story idea. And where does that live? And what scale does that live on? From that kernel of an idea, where does that get seeded? Where does it grow? Where does it flower? Do we make sure that that is that a social first? Is that a 4,000-word article? Is that a podcast? Is that a series? Does this have legs to be a repeat format? So really questioning the breadths of the formats that we tell our stories on. And so just to show some of the scale of what we do and how we activate on that, there's a lot more in here. There's events, there's podcasts, there's you name it. We're very multi-channel, but just some of the examples of how we take an idea and we can really spread that out. The reason that this impacts engagement is that we're really listening to data as to where that story performs best. And I think as a default, we've hired journalists originally who are fantastic at writing editorial content. They can all, in their sleep, do a beautiful article. But getting them to work collaboratively with social, with the newsletter teams, to really think, and our audio teams think, actually what's the best way to tell this story, and getting their skill sets spread out across the different medias that we work in. Centering our audience. This isn't anything new, but just continuing to make sure that our audience insights are at the heart of every department of our business. This works for commercial. It makes more profitable work. We don't need to spend as much on distribution. This works from our editorial team, making sure that we're absolutely maximising the lifetime value of an article as well as the initial publish. Our design, making sure that we're creating stock photography ourselves that we can use in future and also sell and license, spreading our brand. And also this is very much where we're sort of thinking about spreading those insights, not just across our reporting for our team and across the business, but pulling it so central that our CEO knows what's going on from our audience point of view. What are the big shifts in trends and culture? Like, as I said, sort of our predictive engine of culture is all about our audience. It's all about also working with Gen Z talent, bringing them into our business, whether that's editors at large, whether that's social contributors, columnists, it's all tied together. User-generated content. Nothing new, but looking at how we can expand this. So to make sure that we get that engagement, it is really about representation. Representation is something that Refinery29 is incredibly passionate about. It's something that we feel we're always on the forefront of, representing the complexities of our audience and doing our best to always listen to their needs and where they feel underserved, and being able to pull that into storytelling so they feel seen and heard on our different platforms. The way that we also try and bring them into the storytelling and create more engagement is user-generated content. And just a few examples, we relaunched our R29 Style channel this year. This is primarily, it's Instagram first, but it's across different platforms. And it's getting our audience to submit. So it's really simple, just get our audience to submit photos in. We then make sure that that is spread out across our channel, so we have a newsletter. If somebody is featured there, it's a real kudos to them for being an influencer in their own right. And we're choosing audience members who are not at the top of their sort of macro influencer game. It's very much about celebrating the real audience that are reading our site every single day. We have a Money Diaries Facebook group. If anyone doesn't know, Money Diaries is our strongest IP. It's our most popular series. It's where our audience tell us what they spend in a week. It's that simple. But because there is a real a lack of conversation around finances. This isn't unique to the UK, and no one talks about money, but in the US too, and our other markets, and it's sort of breaking down that taboo and getting our audience to be really open about what their wage is, how they're spending their money, and it's free of that judgment on our site, and it's about support and collaboration and financial tips and advice. Our Facebook Money Diaries group is actually led by our audience now, so we've managed to set this up and it runs itself, and it's incredibly positive community, and that spirit of community is something that as a business is incredibly important for those repeat visits, and for as we scale our business to make sure that we have something really unique as a proposition that only we can do. Really quickly, just a few others. Dear Daniela is a beauty advice column. Ask a Therapist is very similar. And then also I've put in here Twitch because we're finding communities where they already exist and bringing in our expertise. So earlier when I was talking about we hire great talent who are passionate about their areas, and we want them to bring in the representation of areas that we don't feel are served. We have some very passionate female gamers in our business, which are completely underrepresented and need definitely to have more spotlight on them. And so we activate on platforms like Twitch. We've got a great plan coming up later this year to make sure that we're finding communities where they don't feel like they have as much of a home as they should. And then maximising IP. This is a real simple one. I'll use Money Diaries as the example again. But building those fan communities allows us to look at scale, and when we talk about revenue diversification, when we create fandom, when we create loyalty, that's when we can look at the scale of, okay, what does conversion look like, and what are the different facets of monetization that we can create from that? Is it direct consumer? Is it affiliate revenue? Is it events, et cetera, et cetera? So with maximising IP, we're really pulling our internal talent front and centre as well. So loyalty, people love people, getting faces of the brand in front of our audience is creating loyalty. We see that dramatically. We see a 6 times over benchmark rate for when we put our editor in the title, which is very basic, but it works very well because it's about recommendations and those faces and those names. So as an example, for the Money Diaries, it's about scaling that across platforms and looking at, for example, this is what started as a US series, turned into a UK series. It's also in Germany. It's also in Australia. What does that look like across our different platforms and tailoring the content for the platform? So what does that look like on Instagram stories? What does it look like on TikTok? What does it look like on that Facebook community that I mentioned? And what does that look like on email? And this is actually accumulating in an event that we're going to be hosting later this year. So it's getting, and we've also got a book. So it's getting that audience really hyper engaged and invested in that series and that IP, and then looking at, okay, well, if these are the hyper engaged fans, let's section that off and let's actually create something of more value to them where they're also willing to provide direct consumer revenue. So that's it. Those are the 4 changes that we've made recently.